WPVI-TV Channel 6 now presents a special tribute to Jim O'Brien. This is an Action News special report, a tribute to Jim O'Brien. Here is Jim Gardner.
This is a program that none of us at Channel 6 wants to broadcast. We do so with a sense of loss that nobody can adequately describe, but we also do so with a sense of love that all of us feel. This is a program about Jim O'Brien, not about his death, which came yesterday while Jim was skydiving. We have all heard too much about that already. This is a program about Jim's life. None of us could ever hear enough about that. For the next half hour, we will reflect back on Jim's life and career, a career that culminated in Jim's status as the most beloved individual on Philadelphia television. We'll be hearing from many people during the next half hour, and so let us begin with Jim's co-anchorman on the 5 o'clock news, Marc Howard.
He sat right there, and I sat here. And we wrote the news every day from 2 to 5. And it was very special, as everybody has said, for me, because Jim and I were, along with Hank Spurka, the 3 over 40 guys in the newsroom. And we really came to appreciate the fact that we'd come to Action News at a time in life when success is really enjoyable. I mean, we really felt good about the fact that here we were in our 40s, you know, top-rated news show in town, really successful. And we look forward to keep on doing it till he'd retire and ski and skydive. I'll tell you a secret that I had. We had a secret between us. He said, never tell anybody, but I guess I can tell you now. He said, don't ever tell anybody up in the newsroom how easy this is, how much fun this is, because they might resent us. Because here we are, you know, working and making it look like it's a tough job. It wasn't tough. It was a joy. I'll always remember it. It's rather fascinating that Jim O'Brien wouldn't have been right there if he hadn't had an accident when he played football at Baylor College. He talked about that a few years ago on tape.
It just ended abruptly, and when it did, that cuts a pretty good sized hole in your life, and this business filled that hole. So I was very happy that I had something I could just jump into and that demanded every ounce of my energy, mentally and physically, the same way that athletics had.
It's obvious, I guess it's painfully obvious tonight to all of us, that football's loss was broadcasting's gain. Jim worked all over the country as a radio disc jockey, and most of us first heard him on WFIL radio.
You know I love him, Stevie, and a superstition song at WFIL.
The TV audiences here in the Delaware Valley got their first look at Jim on the old Channel 6 Dialing for Dollars program. It was love at first sight. Jim was a wild and crazy guy when he played the count and the amount game on the morning show, and did a lot of interviews, too. His best friend and the producer of that program, Art Moore, who went on to become the promotion manager of Channel 6, encouraged Jim to expand what he did. And from interviews there, he went on to co-anchor the noon newscast, and then joined me to ride herd on a 5 o'clock news. And doing all that, he was all business. He was a true professional. And then you add the weather forecasts at 6 and 11. Well, there was a time when Jim literally worked day and night. He told me he used to sleep 3 or 4 hours at night and catch another nap in the afternoon. It was his life. Then you add the news series that he reported, his work on the weekly public affairs program, Prime Time. You can see how Jim O'Brien always gave 100% of the time. And with him setting an example like that, how could you, Jim, or I, or anybody else on Action News ever give anything less than 100%?
We never could give less, Mark, and even if we tried, you can be sure that O'Brien would have been right there to needle us to get us going again. Everybody saw the funny, easygoing side of Jim O'Brien, but not all viewers saw the great job that he did day in and day out preparing our 5 o'clock broadcast. Jim took his journalistic responsibilities very seriously. The 5 o'clock broadcast was very important to him.
I get the tremendous opportunity at 5 o'clock to cover the full spectrum of news, whether it be a little local feature kind of a story that I'm just going to sort of lead into or actually tell the story, or if it be an international event such as the Korean jetliner or Lebanon or whatever.
We've already heard from one of Jim's colleagues and close friends on the 5 o'clock news, Marc Howard. But Jim O'Brien touched many members of the Action News family, touched them deeply. His co-anchor, Lisa Thomas-Laury, and sports reporters Scott Palmer and Gary Papa all wanted to share their memories of Jim.
For the past 5 years now, I have sat across from Jim O'Brien in the newsroom, and of course today that seat is vacant. I'm finding it very difficult to talk about him, not only because I'm a particularly emotional person, but because he was to me, like he was to many, many other people, quite an inspiration. When I started here, I hadn't anchored much. I hadn't been in the news business a very long time, and Jim was very supportive. He was the type of guy who would always bail you out of a situation and would always let you know that he was there to lean on. When you're close to someone like that, who is so strong, who is so supportive, and then all of a sudden they're gone, you don't want to admit it, you don't want to deal with it, and that is what I think all of us here have had to come to grips with. I will miss him terribly. I just hope that wherever Jim is, he knows that if it wasn't said enough, and it probably wasn't, that we thought an awful lot of him, that he touched a lot of people, not only here in this newsroom, but in the Delaware Valley, and that hopefully, because of some part of him that he gave to us, to me in particular, we'll be able to continue and do this most difficult job without him.
We all learned a lot from Jim. I was here only a very short time before I made a mistake on the air. I was unhappy about it, and I told Jim, and he said, not to worry, because there wasn't a mistake that I could make out here that he couldn't get me out of it. He's such a positive thinker, and I'm wondering back to yesterday if he didn't have those same thoughts. He was such a positive thinker, as I said, and he believed that one of the things that made Action News work was turning negatives into positives. This time he's given us an awful big negative. But we wouldn't be serving his memory right if we didn't try to go forward and make a positive out of it.
When we think about Jim O'Brien, and I've only been here about 2 years at the station, is the fact that what he did for all of us is that we all feel right now a very great sense of indebtedness to him personally and professionally, in the sense what he did was bring out the best in all of us, because he had such a high level of life and of expectations, and we would always be seeking to come close to what he was doing. And for the past day, now it's been over a day since Jim has left, I spent the majority of the time talking to the people on the telephone and the streets and throughout, and the loss that he's left in all of us is indescribable. You just didn't realize what he meant on such a level. There's a little bit of Jim O'Brien in all of us forever. And for that we can say that we loved him. And we'll go on knowing that we have his strength within us.
At various times, Jim told many of us in the newsroom that his greatest thrill, the moment when he felt most alive, was when the red light on the camera would flash on, and it would just be, as he put it, me talking to the folks. Jim put his heart and soul into his job every time that red light went on, and he took special pleasure in getting out on the street to report on important stories. Jim put together dozens of memorable news series and special reports over the past few years. After America's air traffic controllers went on strike, Jim set out to assess the safety of our skies. Jim always watched his own eating habits carefully, and he tried to teach the rest of us how to eat, drink, and be healthy. He looked into the baffling learning disability known as dyslexia. He had plenty of suggestions on how we could soothe our aching backs. And he traveled to Florida and Houston to help us take part in a historic event, the first launch of the space shuttle. Jim admired the endurance, ability, and positive attitude of America's astronauts. And just like them, Jim O'Brien had the right stuff. Obviously, Jim O'Brien was an outstanding newsman in many ways, but perhaps he was at his best when he was smack dab in the middle of a big event and the action was happening live around him. Chris Wagner remembers.
It seemed like whenever the Delaware Valley had something to celebrate, there was Jimbo right out front enjoying it along with the rest of us. Remember 1980 when the Phillies were champions of the world?
The welding together of all of us by this experience is a magnificent thing. It is to be savored and remembered forever.
There were other championship seasons, too, and for those of us who couldn't get to the victory parades, Jim was there to bring them alive for us. He told us how Moses led the Sixers to basketball's promised land and how a Polish Pope won the hearts of hundreds of thousands of people across the Delaware Valley. Covering the spectacle of the tall ships was a tall order, but Jim, of course, handled it with his usual easy, freewheeling style. When the first casino opened in Atlantic City, Jim was there to watch the dice roll for the first time and report it to us live. By the way, Jim wasn't a gambler himself. He didn't place a bet. He never smoked. He didn't even eat junk food. But he enjoyed life as much as anyone I've ever known. Jim O'Brien and I weren't always the friends that we are today. We used to butt heads all the time. We're both pretty strong-willed people, and instead of going together, we would go against each other. And it ended one day when he pulled me into an office, and we just battled it out. And from that moment on, from the time that he took the time to really battle it out with me, we became friends, and we've been close friends ever since. He was an encourager. He was always the first one with a compliment, with a show of appreciation, with encouragement. He helped me be better at what I do, and I think he helped me be a better person because he was always striving to be a good person and to be a loving person. And he was. There's a hole in my heart. It's a little place that Jim O'Brien occupied, and I don't think anybody else will ever fit there.
There are well over 100 people who make up the Action News team and dozens of others who are part of the Channel 6 family, engineers, salespeople, studio crew, secretaries, and of course, Jim O'Brien's death has touched them all. They will continue to bring you the kind of reporting and commitment to the community that you would expect from Channel 6, just the way Jim would have wanted. Time won't permit us to name them all. People like Jim's 5 o'clock producer, Susan Brooks, 11 p.m. producer Dave Prohaska, studio cameraman Al Alvanian, videotape editor Dave Them, production assistant Darla Jacks. We all have our memories, and Channel 6 General Manager Larry Pollack and News Director Alan Nesbitt have their own special thoughts to share.
It's hard to imagine Jim O'Brien is gone. I've never met anyone like him in my life, and I've worked with a lot of people. I really loved him. It's not embarrassing for me to say it, and I know my wife and children did also. And maybe that's what I remember most and will remember most about Jim, along with so many other happy things and serious things. Jim looked upon Channel 6 as his family. He often told me that he had done the U-Haul trailer bit, and I asked him what did he mean by the U-Haul trailer bit. And he used to say, you know, Larry, I started off in Waco, Texas, and then proceeded to list a number of cities and different places he had been. And he said when he came to Philadelphia, and specifically when he came here to Channel 6, that's when he really felt at home. And that was very instrumental throughout his whole life and his whole work experience with me. He had a long-term commitment to the station. He used to take on people from all over the country who would make some pretty good favorable comment about their hometown, and he'd say, hey, you haven't heard anything yet. Let me tell you about how terrific Philadelphia is. He loved all the people. He traveled all over from South Jersey to Delaware to all the right places in Philadelphia and the suburbs. And he really was very much committed to this area, to its people, and to all of us at Channel 6. And it may be trite, but I can't help but feel that we've lost someone from our family.
Jim O'Brien was a very special person among many, many special people in the newsroom. One of the remarkable things about Jim, I think, was his human dynamics. He just had a sense of zeal, both for his personal life and for his work, which affected us all. You couldn't help, when you were around him, to have some of that enthusiasm rub off. He demanded excellence from himself and from those around him, and there's no doubt in my mind he had a profound effect on helping to form some of the glue that made Action News what it is. Life will go on, and with many of the solid professionals in here, Action News will go on, but we can't replace Jim O'Brien. There's just no way that a man like him can be replaced. And it's ironic, right outside of my window here is his desk and his workplace, and it's going to be very tough for me to look out there over the next few weeks and months and not realize that he's not coming back. We're going to miss him like crazy.
We all have our memories. Certainly I have mine, but to most people in the Delaware Valley, the memory that will invariably bring a smile is that of Jim O'Brien, the weatherman.
The only rain feature in the country out here, a place called Prescott, Arizona, not far from the Putrefied Forest. 10 inches of rain in 24 hours. But it can't get to us. We're going to stay dry, my friends. And today, record low temperatures from the Dakotas to the Carolinas. 23 degrees, the national low this morning in a place up in Minnesota. I forget exactly where. Anyway, and now that we've lost you completely, let me get you back with some plain old garbage about the weather thing. All right, gang? Here we go. 19 degrees in Williston, North Dakota this morning, hard by the shores of Lake Sakakawea. But nevertheless, that is indicative of freeze warnings which are out tonight.
Jim's humor made us all smile, but the weather was no laughing matter for Jim when Mother Nature turned tough. Witnessed the blizzard of 1983.
So, genuinely speaking, it is as huge a mess as you can imagine. The one bright spot we can give you is that the snow will taper off during the night. We'll have an entire weekend to dig out with some really nice, bright weather on the way. But this is going into the record books, apparently, as the biggest snowfall ever in the history of Philadelphia.
Probably no one worked more closely with Jim on the weather than fellow weather forecaster and AM Philadelphia host Dave Roberts.
These sheets that I hold in my hand are just part of the AccuWeather briefing reports that Jim and I shared. I would get them first and then, of course, take them up to Jim and pass them along. And usually that was about 5 minutes before 5, and he was extremely busy and I was on the run. But he always took the time just to say, "Yo, Dave." "Thanks, Dave. I won't be taking these sheets up to Jim anymore. It's a difficult situation to face for me personally. I won't be on the receiving end of his smile, his laughter, his kidding, his joking. We did parades together, Thanksgiving Day parades, coverage of the Pope, the telethon, the tall ships. One of the things I value is a picture that I had on my desk since last year of us at the Thanksgiving Day parade, last year's parade, with stage manager Bill Russell and myself. We both always had a good time. Jim had the way of making people enjoy their work and getting the best from them. And he always said, "All right, Davey, I'm pumped. Let's do it." And we did.
Sports director Don Tollfeson is someone who over the years may have spent more time on the set with Jim O'Brien than anybody else, and off the set as well. Jim O'Brien had a major impact on Don's life.
All day when I've been thinking about Jim, I've thought about what he taught me concerning life, because as much as he taught me about broadcasting, he taught me even more about living. He taught me to love what you do. He taught me to love living each day to its fullest. And he taught me to love you, the people, or as he called you, the folks, who for so long put your trust in Jim O'Brien and all of us here at Channel 6, who have tried to do the best we can at bringing you the news. It'll never be the same without Jim. We all know that. But Jim would want us more than anything else to carry on in the tradition that he taught us, to do what you have to do. So to remember Jim in the way that I think he would want us to, we'll keep plugging away, doing our best day in and day out. And most importantly, we'll try to fulfill your trust, because those of us who love Jim as much as we do know that that would be the only fitting way to remember somebody we'll never forget.
Jim O'Brien may have been born in Texas, but there is no question about it. Philadelphia was his adopted home. There were certain well-known people, everyone from politicians to sports figures, who earned Jim's respect and admiration. And they felt the same way about him.
You know, during my career, I somehow, you know, he always had the kind word and the proper word to help me to get back on the positive track.
He responded in a very warm manner to the people who were with him and who came up to him because they recognized him. And it was a wonderful kind of an open way of relating to people that you don't often see with public figures. And I found myself really secretly rather admiring of his ability to be that way.
The fact is, the community of broadcasters in the Delaware Valley is a small one, and many people owe so much to Jim O'Brien in so many different ways. He helped many get their careers off the ground. He encouraged others to keep going when things got tough. And he was an inspiration to everyone who looks for the best from the television industry. WCAU-TV anchorman and former Channel 6 anchorman Larry Kane expressed those sentiments today.
He stood for absolute excellence, and he would accept nothing less than that. And I think that as time goes by, he really serves as an example to all the younger people in our business that the only thing that counts is performance, that the only thing that counts is a level of consistency and excellency. And I can't tell you what a loss this is for me personally, because this man did so much for me on television. He just made me look better. He made me perform better. He made me communicate better. And my mother, who died some years ago, always told me that the greatest legacy a person could leave behind is how they touched other people. And this man touched so many people, family, friends, millions of viewers, literally millions of viewers. But he touched people who worked with him in a special way. He made them so excited about their job, and he knew that communication was the beginning of understanding, and nobody understood that more. And I just can't believe that this has happened, because Philadelphia television will never be the same.
Countless numbers of people have been paying tribute today to Jim O'Brien. The New Jersey legislature observed a moment of silence for Jim. And on Thursday, the Philadelphia City Council will act on a resolution honoring Jim. A private memorial service will be held in Philadelphia on Wednesday, and Jim will be buried next to his father in Houston, Texas on Thursday. His family has asked that instead of flowers, donations be sent to the Heart Association or the Muscular Dystrophy Association. And you can be sure we will forward all of your sympathy cards to Jim's family. For the past 20 minutes or so, we have heard a lot of people talk about Jim O'Brien, what made him tick, what he was like, why he did the things he did. For the next few moments, we would like you to hear what Jim had to say about Jim.
I was raised on a little farm, which was not a farm where we had to farm for a living. My father had a job in town, but he always wanted to have land and cattle and horses and a little crop here and there and yonder. My father was a very hard-working kind of a guy. His creed and his way of living was just to work hard, and he raised me that way, just to give a man a day's work for a day's pay.
Now, how long have you been involved in jumping?
August the 12th, 1978.
Boy, you'll never forget that day.
That's where prime time started. The very first prime time show was my first jump, and then we pursued it after that. The first jump is a real moment.
Mm-hmm. I can imagine.
How do you feel? I mean, what's
well, the main thing that you feel is why did I ever get involved in this? A lot of people who saw that first primetime show say, you know, we see fear on your face. I said, you're misreading that. That was terror. That was stark, absolute fear. There's nothing quite like it. You see yourself in a light that you've probably never seen yourself before when you make that first jump. I think that everybody sort of harbors that thing way down inside. You say, gosh, I'd like to climb a mountain or drive a fast car or whatever. There's always something that somebody would like to do, but you never ever have the chance. Well, I'd always wanted a parachute and never got the chance. And all of a sudden, to start the prime time series almost 5 years ago, they rigged me up with a school and an instructor, and I accepted the challenge and pursued it from there.
It's my evaluation in my own personal life that the difference in folks who are in Philadelphia and the folks in Waco, where I started, is just that one word: concentration. because a lot of folks aren't willing to or able to concentrate as hard as you have to be able to get the job done over a given period of time on the air. In other words, you got this little bitty time on the air, whether it be an hour or a few seconds at a time or a couple of minutes or whatever it is, and you've got a job to do, and if you concentrate hard enough, you can do it. And that separates the men from the boys. What I figure is that they trust me, they believe me in whatever role I am. They say, that's Jim O'Brien. And he's doing what he always does. He's trying to tell us something. He's trying to communicate with us. And that's the bottom line.
And now I want my say. Throughout the years, we have often used the term the Action News family. For many of us, that term has been far more than a promotional gimmick. It is true, it is a much larger family than it was 10 years ago, and like any very large family, some members feel closer to each other than others do. But clearly, the death of Jim O'Brien has, in a profound way, made this organization feel even more like a family than perhaps anything else ever has. People here whose paths don't cross very often have been crying together. They have been commiserating as one, and of course the reason is clear, and one that virtually all of you should understand. Even in a very large family, when a beloved brother dies, and in this case dies suddenly without warning, it draws everybody very close together. They have lost something common to all. And in fact, in life, Jim O'Brien served as something of a hub to a wheel with many spokes. Nobody here managed to create his kind of special relationships with the numerous people who comprise every facet of this operation. Through their interaction with him, he was something of a link between photographers, videotape editors, sound technicians, the studio crew, the producers, the writers, the desk assignment editors, the anchors. He was, in fact, the glue. There are few of you who have not experienced the loss of a loved one. And just like you, we will go through a time of mourning and grief. But as Dave Roberts said in our noon program today, we are paid to be professionals. And our profession is to bring you the news. In the midst of our sorrow, we will continue to do this to the very best of our ability. Our hope is that we will perform our function as well as we always have. In fact, that is not our hope, that is our expectation, as it should be yours. But in our hearts and minds, we recognize that it will never be quite the same. But just like all families, we will carry on, and we will even laugh again, have good times again, and what is now painful grief will become a series of wonderful memories. You see, that is the way it is when a family loses a loved one. But the reason why we're here is to broadcast the news. And Jim would not, for a moment, tolerate even the slightest sign that we are not up to the task. For that matter, the professionalism that we all feel, that I feel, wouldn't tolerate that either. We thank you for your outpouring of good wishes. We know that you share our grief, and in one sense, that means that the Action News family extends to all of you as well. In spite of all the impact that Jim made here, and in spite of all the relationships that he forged in this building, what mattered most to Jim O'Brien was his relationship with you, his viewers. And we can think of no better way to conclude this broadcast than to let Jim himself explain the way he felt about you.
I felt that if I went along my way and was able to touch one or two or three people in my whole life, that was okay with me.